There is a cage. You cannot see it, you cannot touch it, you cannot point to it on a map or find it in a room. But it is real, more real than anything you own, more powerful than any external force acting on your life. And right now, as you watch this, it is deciding what you will do tomorrow. What opportunities you will take, which ones you will quietly walk away from. How much money you will make this year, how much you will make 5 years from now. This cage has a name, most people call it the comfort zone, but that name is too soft. Too gentle, too innocent sounding for something that is actively, methodically destroying your financial future. Because here is what nobody tells you about the comfort zone. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not a character flaw you need to overcome with enough motivation. It is a biological survival mechanism built into your brain over 200,000 years of human evolution. Designed with extraordinary precision to keep you exactly where you are. And understanding that, truly understanding it, is the difference between spending the rest of your life fighting yourself and actually breaking free. So let's go deep, let's go all the way to the root, because the root is where the real freedom lies. I want you to think about the last time you had an opportunity, a real one. Maybe someone offered you a chance to invest in something. Maybe you had an idea for a business that kept coming back to you, week after week, month after month. Maybe there was a conversation you needed to have about a raise. About a partnership, about a risk that could have changed everything. And you didn't take it, not because you couldn't, not because the timing was wrong. Not because the opportunity wasn't real. But because something inside you, something quiet and ancient and incredibly powerful, said no. Said not yet, said what if it doesn't work, said you're not ready. Said this is not who you are, that voice, that feeling. That invisible hand pulling you back from the edge of your own potential. That is your comfort zone, and it has been making your financial decisions for you for years. Dr. Abraham Maslow, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, described the human condition this way. He said that in every person there are two sets of forces. One that clings to safety and defensiveness out of fear, and one that pushes forward toward growth and self-actualization. And he said that growth must be chosen over safety again and again and again. Because safety left unchecked will always win, not because you are weak, but because safety is the brain's default setting. Safety is what kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. Safety is what told them, don't go into that dark cave. Don't approach that unfamiliar animal, don't venture too far from the tribe. Safety was survival, but here is the devastating truth of the modern world. The things that will make you wealthy, the risks, the investments. The bold conversations. The uncomfortable decisions, all of them feel unsafe to your ancient brain. All of them trigger the same alarm system that kept your ancestors alive. The same cortisol spike, the same racing heart, the same overwhelming urge to retreat to familiar ground. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a lion on the savannah and a business pitch in a conference room. It registers both as threats, it responds to both with fear. And it pushes you with extraordinary force back toward the familiar. Back toward the known, back toward the cage. This is what neuroscientists call the homeostasis response. Your brain, specifically a region called the hypothalamus, is constantly working to maintain your current state. Your current body temperature, your current heart rate, your current emotional baseline, and your current financial reality. Because to your brain, familiar equals safe, even when familiar is painful. Even when familiar is keeping you broke. Even when familiar is a life that is far smaller than the one you are capable of living. Familiar is safe, and safe is what the brain will always choose unless you consciously, deliberately, repeatedly override it. Now let me show you exactly how this plays out in real financial life. Because this is not abstract, this is happening in specific, concrete, measurable ways every single day. Every time you get a raise and immediately find new ways to spend it, that is homeostasis pulling your financial reality back to its familiar baseline. Every time you start a savings plan with real commitment and then quietly abandon it 3 weeks later, that is the comfort zone reasserting control. Every time you research an investment, feel genuinely excited about it, and then talk yourself out of it with 100 reasonable-sounding excuses, that is your ancient brain choosing familiar over growth. Every time you have the salary negotiation conversation fully prepared in your mind, and then let the moment pass without saying a word, that is the invisible cage slamming shut. These are not coincidences, these are not character flaws. These are the predictable, measurable outcomes of a brain that has been programmed to protect you from anything that feels unfamiliar, including wealth. Because wealth, real wealth, the kind that changes your life, requires you to become someone different from who you are today. And becoming different feels dangerous, even when staying the same is far more dangerous in the long run. A behavioral economist named Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on human decision-making, identified a concept he called loss aversion. And it is one of the most powerful forces in all of human psychology. Loss aversion is the finding, proven across hundreds of studies, that the pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. In other words, losing $100 feels twice as bad as gaining $100 feels good. This asymmetry is not rational, but it is deeply, profoundly human. And it means that every financial opportunity, every investment, every risk, every uncomfortable decision is being evaluated by a brain that is systematically, automatically overweighting the potential downside. That is not caution, that is a cognitive bias built into your hardware. And until you understand it, until you can recognize it in real time as it happens, it will continue to make your financial decisions for you. Choosing safety over growth, choosing familiar over possible, choosing the cage over the life you actually want. I want to tell you about a woman named Sarah. Sarah was 34 years old. Smart, capable, hardworking, she had been at the same company for 9 years. Same role for the last 4, and every single year she told herself, this is the year I ask for the promotion. This is the year I have the conversation. This is the year things change. And every single year, the conversation never happened. Not because Sarah didn't deserve the promotion. She deserved it more than anyone in her department. Not because the timing was wrong, there were a dozen perfect moments. But every time Sarah got close, every time she felt the conversation forming, felt the courage rising, something happened. Her heart rate spiked, her palms got damp. A voice appeared calm, reasonable, utterly convincing, and said things like, maybe wait until after the quarterly review, maybe now is not the right time. Maybe you should build a stronger case first. And Sarah listened every single time because that voice felt like wisdom. It felt like practicality, it felt like self-protection, but it was not wisdom. It was her comfort zone. It was her ancient brain choosing the familiar discomfort of staying small over the terrifying possibility of asking for more. In over 4 years, that choice cost Sarah, conservatively, over $60,000 in salary she never received. $60,000 not lost in a bad investment, not spent on liabilities. Simply never earned, because the comfort zone made the decision before Sarah's conscious mind even got involved. This is the invisible tax of the comfort zone. It does not show up on a bank statement. It does not announce itself. It is simply the gap between the life you are living and the life you are capable of. Measured in opportunities not taken, conversations not had, risks not embraced. Versions of yourself never fully inhabited. And for most people, that gap, accumulated over a lifetime, represents the difference between financial freedom and financial struggle. Between building wealth and simply surviving, between a life chosen and a life defaulted into. Now here is where I want to shift, because I did not bring you here just to show you the cage. I brought you here to show you the door, and the door is real. The neuroscience of change is real. The research on how human beings actually break out of deeply embedded behavioral patterns is real. And it is more hopeful, more practically actionable than most people realize. Because the comfort zone is not permanent, it is not fixed, it is not who you are. It is simply where you are right now, and where you are right now can change. Let me show you exactly how. Because this is where everything shifts. This is the part of the conversation that most motivational content never gets to. They show you the problem, they make you feel the pain. They leave you fired up for 48 hours, and then Monday morning arrives. And the cage is still there, and you are still inside it. Because motivation without mechanism is just emotion. And emotion without direction fades, so let's talk about the mechanism. Let's talk about the actual, neurologically grounded, research-backed process of expanding your comfort zone permanently. Not temporarily, not for a week of inspiration, permanently. The first thing you need to understand is this: you do not break out of your comfort zone. You expand it. This distinction matters more than it sounds. Breaking out implies a single dramatic moment of courage, a leap, a jump. A one-time act of bravery that changes everything. And that model, as romantic as it sounds, is neurologically inaccurate. Because the brain does not change through dramatic leaps. The brain changes through repeated, incremental exposure to discomfort. Through what neuroscientists call progressive desensitization. The same process used to treat phobias, the same process elite athletes use to perform under pressure. The same process that, applied to your financial life, will systematically dismantle the invisible cage one wall at a time. Here is how it works in practice, Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford whose research on the brain and behavior has reached millions of people, describes a concept he calls the growth zone threshold. The idea is simple but profound. Between your comfort zone and what feels genuinely overwhelming, there is a narrow band. A zone of productive discomfort, where the task feels challenging but not paralyzing. Where your heart rate rises but does not spike into panic. Where you feel resistance but not shut down. That narrow band, that precise edge of discomfort, is where neurological growth happens. That is where new neural pathways form. That is where the brain's map of what is safe and familiar begins to expand. And the key, the single most important insight in all of behavioral change, is that you must operate in that zone consistently. Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, consistently every single day. Small actions, uncomfortable actions, actions that sit just beyond the boundary of what currently feels natural. And here is what happens when you do this. The boundary moves slowly at first. Almost imperceptibly, but it moves. And what felt terrifying last month feels merely uncomfortable this month. And what feels merely uncomfortable this month will feel almost natural next month. This is not metaphor, this is measurable neurological change. This is the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, adapting to its environment. You are simply taking conscious control of which environment you are asking it to adapt to. Now let me give you the first step of the framework. Step 1 is what I call micro-exposure. This is the foundation of everything. And it is deliberately, intentionally small. Here is why. When most people decide to break out of their comfort zone, they go too big too fast. They decide they are going to quit their job and start a business on Monday. They decide they are going to invest their entire savings in something they heard about last week. They decide they are going to completely overhaul their financial life starting right now. And what happens? The brain, faced with a threat that feels overwhelming, activates its full defensive response. Cortisol floods the system. The prefrontal cortex, the rational planning part of the brain, goes partially offline. And within days, sometimes hours, the whole thing collapses. Not because you lack willpower, because you asked your nervous system to make a change that was too large, too fast, too far outside the boundaries of what it currently recognizes as safe. Micro-exposure works differently. It asks for changes so small that the brain's alarm system barely registers them. Small enough to actually do, small enough to actually complete. Small enough to build the evidence your subconscious needs to start updating its map of what is possible for you. Here is what micro-exposure looks like in real financial life. Instead of cold calling 10 potential clients, you send one email. Instead of investing $10,000, you invest 50. Instead of negotiating your entire compensation package, you ask one clarifying question about your role's growth potential. Instead of launching the whole business, you tell one person about the idea. Each of these actions is a vote against the comfort zone. A vote for the expanding version of your identity, and votes accumulate. Slowly and visibly, powerfully, they accumulate. Until one day the action that once required enormous courage requires almost none. Because it has become familiar, because the brain has updated its map. Because what was once outside the cage is now inside it, and the cage is bigger. And you are bigger inside it. Step 2 is what I call the discomfort log. This is a tool that sounds almost embarrassingly simple. But the research behind it is extraordinary. Here is what you do. Every day, at the end of the day, you write down one uncomfortable thing you did. One moment where you felt the resistance and acted anyway. One instance where the comfort zone pushed back and you pushed forward. It does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be life-changing. It just has to be real. Maybe you made the phone call you had been avoiding. Maybe you sent the pitch email you had been sitting on for 2 weeks. Maybe you looked at your investment account when you usually look away. Maybe you had 30 seconds of an honest financial conversation with your partner that you have been postponing for months. Write it down, date it, keep the log. Here is why this works on a neurological level, Dr. James Pennebaker, a psychologist at the University of Texas, spent decades studying the relationship between writing and behavioral change. And what he found consistently, across hundreds of studies, is that the act of writing an experience down forces the brain to process it differently. More completely, more consciously, more permanently. When you write down the uncomfortable thing you did, when you name it, date it, and record it, you are essentially telling your brain this happened, this was real. And I survived it. And survival is the most powerful signal you can send to a brain that is trying to protect you from perceived danger. Every entry in the discomfort log is a piece of evidence. Evidence that discomfort does not equal destruction. Evidence that the things your comfort zone told you were dangerous are actually survivable. Evidence that you are becoming someone different, someone bigger. Someone whose map of the possible has expanded. And over weeks and months, that evidence accumulates into something profound. A new self-image, a new financial identity, a new answer to the question, what kind of person am I when it comes to money? Step 3 is what I call environment architecture. This is the most underestimated step, and in many ways the most powerful. Because here is something that behavioral science has confirmed over and over again. Willpower is not a reliable resource, it depletes, it fluctuates. It fails under stress, under fatigue, under emotional pressure. And the people who rely on willpower alone to break out of their comfort zone will always, eventually, be pulled back in. Because the environment is stronger than the individual, always. But here is the flip side of that truth. If you design your environment deliberately, if you architect the space around you to make growth easier and retreat harder, you stop fighting the current and start swimming with it. Environment architecture means surrounding yourself with people who are operating outside their own comfort zones financially. It means removing the friction from the behaviors you want to increase. The investment app on the front page of your phone, the book on your pillow, the business plan document open on your desktop every morning. It means adding friction to the behaviors you want to decrease. The extra steps required to access the accounts you tend to drain. The social media apps moved off the home screen. The subscriptions canceled that were numbing you rather than growing you. Jim Rohn, one of the most influential voices in personal development, made an observation that has been validated by decades of social science research. He said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And while that specific formulation is debated, the underlying principle is rock solid. The people around you set the invisible standard for what is normal. For what is possible, for what is acceptable. If everyone around you is comfortable being broke will feel normal. If everyone around you is building something will feel like the obvious thing to do. You do not rise above your environment through sheer force of will. You rise by changing the environment. By deliberately, strategically placing yourself in proximity to the behaviors and beliefs and identities you want to grow into. This is not about abandoning the people you love. This is about adding. Adding mentors even through books, podcasts, videos like this one. Adding communities of people who are doing the uncomfortable work. Adding inputs that expand your map of the possible rather than confirm the boundaries of the familiar. Because the comfort zone is not just inside your head. It is reinforced daily, constantly and visibly by everything and everyone around you. Change the inputs, change the standard of normal, and watch the cage begin to dissolve. Now I want to leave you with something that I have been thinking about for a long time. There is a concept in psychology called the end of history illusion. Researchers at Harvard studied thousands of people across different ages and found something fascinating. People of all ages consistently recognized how much they had changed in the past 10 years. But those same people consistently believed they would change very little in the next 10 years. As if the person they are right now is somehow the finished version, the final draft, the completed human being. And that illusion, that quiet, unconscious belief that who you are today is fundamentally who you will always be, is one of the most expensive illusions a person can hold. Because it is the illusion that makes the cage feel permanent. That makes the comfort zone feel like identity rather than habit. That makes the familiar feel like destiny rather than simply the current default setting of a brain that is waiting right now. In this moment for new instructions, you are not finished, you are not fixed, you are not the permanent version of yourself. You are a human being with a plastic brain, a brain that neuroscientists have confirmed remains capable of profound structural change well into adulthood, sitting at the edge of a decision. The decision to stay where the brain says is safe. Or the decision to take one small step, just one, just today, into the zone where growth actually lives. That step will feel wrong, it will feel uncomfortable. It will feel like too much and not enough at the same time. Take it anyway. And then take another one tomorrow, and another one the day after that. Because that is how cages dissolve, not in a single dramatic moment of inspiration, but in the quiet, daily, unglamorous accumulation of small acts of courage. Each one a vote for the person you are becoming. Each one a signal to your ancient brain that the world outside the familiar is not only survivable, it is where you were always meant to live. The cage was never locked, it never was, you were simply told it was. And you believed it because you were never shown the door, but now you have seen it. And seeing it, really seeing it, feeling it, understanding it at the level where change actually happens, means you can never fully unsee it. The comfortable version of staying stuck will never feel quite as comfortable again. And that discomfort, that new, growing, productive discomfort, is not a warning. It is an invitation. An invitation to the version of your financial life that has been waiting on the other side of your comfort zone this entire time. Patiently, quietly, knowing you would find your way here eventually, you made it. Now take the step. Drop shift in the comments right now if this video cracked something open in you. If it put words to something you have been feeling for a long time but could never quite name. I read every single one. And if you are ready to go deeper every single week, if you want content that treats your mind and your money with the seriousness they deserve, subscribe to this channel. We go deep here every week, no fluff, no fake motivation, just real psychology. Real science, real change, and we're just getting started.